Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 4 Learning and Memory. Today we will learn how do we learn, and I want to start with a script. It is about Joe and Joe's journey through the time. A day of Joe, a slice from his day. So let's start. Oh, Sunday morning, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and Joe is feeling goofy. He puts on his vintage Levi's 501 jeans, which belongs to circa 1968, and his Woodstock t-shirt and saunters down to the kitchen. Joe smiles in anticipation of his morning plans. He has just returned from his college reunion, and now it is time to process all the people he has seen and the stories he heard about their old antics. Joe cranks up the lava lamp, throws a Grateful Dead record on the turntable, and sits back on his Barca lounger as he clutches a huge bowl filled to the brim with his all-time favorite cereal, Cap'n Crunch. Let the memories begin. This little slice of Joe's life is actually showing us that with the help of products, he feels good because the products, Levi's jeans, Woodstock t-shirt, Grateful Dead record, even the Cap'n Crunch cereal, remind him of earlier parts of his life. His happy memories are reminded to him through these products. This is called nostalgia. Products have capitalized on this concept called nostalgia. Many brands are using this idea of reminding people their happy moments, reminding people their past selves through products in order to sell more. For example, Pepsi launched its throwback campaign. Now it sells Pepsi Throwback, Mountain Dew Throwback, and also Doritos launched taco flavored chips in authentic retro packages that was similar to the ones that they were first using many years ago when they first launched taco flavor. These are some examples how brands are actually using the concept of nostalgia, reminding consumers their happy past selves through the products. The Pepsi marketing executive explained their throwback campaign as this is a quotation from him, so I copied it here that I'm gonna read now. Retro is very cool with 20 somethings because it ties in with their desire for simpler, cleaner, more authentic lives. Many of them are engaged in identity self creation through their Facebook pages, Instagram, Twitter, and other social media, and they see nostalgia as a way to differentiate themselves. According to Pepsi's marketing executive, this nostalgia concept reminding people their past selves is not only popular for baby boomer generation who is older and who has experiences with those old products which reminds them their youth, their earlier time, their college days, but also it is very cool and considered cool, and it is popular according to Generation Z. So today we see that Generation Z, 20 something, so I think it is your age group, is also interested in retro products which has roots in the past. How do we learn then? How do we learn to be consumers? This is what we're going to learn in this chapter. The learner need not have the experience directly. We can also learn when we observe events that affect others. We learn even when we don't try. We recognize many brand names, and we recognize many product jingles. For example, even for products we don't personally use, we might remember them, we might know them somehow. unconsciously. We call this casual, unintentional acquisition of knowledge incidental learning. On the other hand, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior caused by experience. Learning is an ongoing process. Our knowledge about the world constantly updates as we are exposed to new stimuli and as we receive ongoing feedback that allows us to modify our behavior, our reactions, our responses when we find ourselves in similar situations at a later time. So we are exposed to a stimuli, we receive an ongoing feedback, and then we don't even know, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, we modify, we change our behavior, and we find ourselves, when we find ourselves in a similar situation in the future, in a later time, we show that reaction. This is learning, and that's why we call that learning is an ongoing process, and it is a permanent change in behavior caused by experience. Okay, let's start to understand how do we learn by going through behavioral learning theories. Behavioral learning theories assume that learning takes place as a result of responses to external events. Psychologists who support this viewpoint don't focus on internal thought processes. Instead, they approach the mind as a black box and emphasize the observable aspects of behavior. The observable aspects consist of the things that go into the box, the stimuli or events perceived from the outside world. These are going into the box, and the things that come out of the box, which are the responses, reactions to these stimuli. Two major approaches to learning represent this view: classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning. Instrumental conditioning is also called operant conditioning. Uh, Classical conditioning is when a stimulus that elicits a response is paired with another stimulus that initially does not elicit a response on its own. On the other hand, instrumental conditioning, which is also called operant conditioning, is defined as the individual learns to perform behaviors that produce positive outcomes and to avoid those that yield negative outcomes. That means that instrumental conditioning means to condition behavior using consequences. It refers to voluntary behaviors, while classical conditioning works to condition responses to involuntary behaviors. We will cover more about classical conditioning on the next slides. I will give you a very cliche example. I'm sure you have heard about it, but it will help you to understand how classical conditioning works. So, classical conditioning. Classical conditioning occurs when a stimulus that elicits a response is paired with another stimulus that initially does not elicit a response on its own. Over time, the second stimulus causes a similar response because we associate it with the first stimulus. Ivan Pavlov, I also assume, not only hope, that you have heard about Pavlov's dog, how do you say, teaching experiment. He was training the dog with the experiment to also explain how classical conditioning is working. Ivan Pavlov is a Russian psychologist, and he conducted research on digestion in animals. First demonstrated this classical conditioning phenomenon in dogs. What he did is He paired a neutral stimulus, which is the bell, with a stimulus known to cause a salivation response in dogs. The food was an unconditioned stimulus because it was naturally capable of causing the response, which is the salivation. Over time, the bell became a conditioned stimulus. The bell did not initially cause salivation, but the dog learned to associate the bell with the food and began to salivate at the sound of the bell only. The drooling of these canine consumers because of a sound was a conditioned response. So here I want you to learn that first, having a salivation response to food for a dog is an unconditioned stimulus. It is expected. So the salivation is unconditioned response and the food is unconditioned stimulus. The bell is neutral. Normally, when a dog hears a bell, you don't expect the dog to produce salivation. So there the neutral stimulus and the response is no salivation, which is no conditioned response. If you give food to a dog and then while giving the food or before giving the food, if you ring the bell, the salivation continues because salivation is normally conditioned for the food. But then you take out the food away because the dog learned that whenever the bell rings, food comes. When the dog hears the bell ringing, the response is salivation. So unconditioned stimulus is the bell, and the conditioned response that is caused by learning is salivation. So here we learned 4 different terminology: unconditioned stimulus, conditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, and conditioned response. Conditioning effects are more. Okay, since this is about marketing, you might be asking me, why are we learning so much psychology? Why are we learning all this stimuli and stimuli, all these what's going on in learning? Because classical conditioning principles are actually used in marketing applications. Behavior learning principles apply to many consumer phenomena, such as creating a distinctive brand image or linking a product to an underlying need. This is an example from Procter & Gamble. They opened a new line of Tide dry cleaners named after its best-selling laundry detergent, which is Tide. Procter & Gamble rely on the more than 800,000 Facebook fans of Tide and other loyal detergent users to trust their clothes to the franchise stores. Procter & Gamble plans to infuse the stores and its dry cleaning fluids with the familiar Tide scent just to underscore the connection. So they are expecting the consumer who is already a Tide fan and using only Tide at home will trust the dry cleaner and the Tide name brand cleaning fluids for dry cleaning. Also, whenever they franchise their store to other cleaners, again because of the name of Tide, consumers will have positive associations with the dry cleaner store and expect good results. That's why, with the assumption and expectations of positive outcomes, they would choose those stores instead of other competitors. Another marketing application of classical conditioning principles is brand equity. Brand equity means that brand has strong positive associations in a consumer's memory and commands a lot of loyalty as a result. In my previous example, I talked about Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble uses its strong brand equity for the dry cleaner extension that they launched for Tide detergent, laundry detergent. Marketing Applications of repetition is another area that we see behavioral learning principles applied. Many classic advertising campaigns consist of product slogans repeated, often to enhance the recall. But for this to work, the unconditioned stimuli must repeatedly be paired with the conditioned stimuli, otherwise, extinction occurs. Extinction means that the association is forgotten. Even when associations are established, too much exposure can turn negative. In that case, the association may change in terms of whether it is pursued as positive or negative. For example, Toyota ran a commercial featuring a reworked version of the Fix song Saved by Zero to promote its no interest payment options so many times that uh, close to 10,000 viewers who were fed up with the commercial organized the Facebook group to petition the company for mercy. As one worn out group member posted, I'm reading what they posted here, I'm gonna read it. There have been worse commercials, and there have been commercials that were played this often, but never before has a commercial this bad been aired so much. People were so fed up from the exposure, from being exposed to this advertising of Toyota, that they started a Facebook campaign, and they even changed the song that they were using as a jingle in their commercial, Saved by Zero. They switched it to Killed by Zero. So this is advertising wear out. Too much exposure leads to advertising wear out. So you don't want that, because while you want people to remember you, while you want to enhance recall, while you want to increase brand awareness with exposures, you don't want people to have negative associations, such as in the example of this Toyota commercial, with your brand. You don't want to have the negative associations because of the exposure. Let's talk about the marketing applications of stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization is the tendency for stimuli similar to conditioned stimulus to evoke similar unconditioned responses. The process of stimulus generalization is critical to branding and packaging decisions, especially for the brands who try to capitalize on consumers' positive associations with an existing brand or company name. Marketers can base some strategies on stimulus generalization. For example, family branding. Family branding enables products to capitalize on the repetition of a company name. Next slide, I will show you an example of family branding. So what is family branding? Dove is a very good example. A company's own corporate name used to brand its all product lines and products. For example, Dove soap, Dove deodorant, Dove shampoo, Dove body wash, Dove body lotion, Dove conditioner, Dove men. All of them are named as Dove. Dove is the corporate name, and Dove uses its corporate name to all product lines and all products. Even if it's a new extension or not, it always comes under Dove name. So once I think Dove first came to the market with its soap, they created a positive association for the brand name Dove, and after that any product extension with the Dove created the same positive association that Dove products is good. Dove products are gonna be good. Dove products are not going to disappoint me feeling because of the first success. This is how the stimulus generalization work. Once you have the for your original product a positive association, the other products that you add to your catalog is expected to result in the same manner. The second stimulus generalization application to marketing is product line extension. Marketers can use product line extensions by adding related products to an established brand. Next slide will give example. This is very similar to Dole example. Actually, it's the same. How you do family branding. Dole is doing family branding. Dole is their corporate name. They were successful. They were pineapple producers. Dole is associated with fruit, introduced refrigerated juices and juice bars. Similarly, Sun-Maid went from producing raisins to raisin breads. So they extend their product line with their family branding, Sun-Maid or Dole, because and they apply this stimulus generalization into their branding, because once they were, for example, Dole, similar to Dough, was successful with the pineapples. They extended their product line to fruit bars and 100% no sugar added juices. And Sun-Maid, popular with raisins, they created raisin English muffin, raisin bread. So they extended their product line by using their family branding, the positive association, the positive brand image they have in the mind of the consumer. Another application is licensing. Companies often rent their well-known names, their positively associated names, hoping then that the learned positive associations they have will transfer onto other kinds of products. So what happens? Disney is doing a lot of licensing, same with Bentley. Disney and Bentley is among many luxury brands that is aggressively licensing their names in other product categories. They get paid for giving their names. Bentley is doing for perfumes. Disney is licensing its Disney characters and its logo to Visa, to Band-Aid. The Frozen, its most profitable cartoon, is licensed to Band-Aid, Oral-B for kids. So they're also making money from licensing because they are selling the good positive associations of their brand image to other products. So people expect that and assume that this Band-Aid with Disney characters, Oral-B Disney, those collaborations will be successful because of Disney's success. Or the perfume of Bentley is going to be cool and chic and elegant because Bentley is already a cool, chic, and elegant brand. So the associations that consumers have to a specific brand is transferred to other product categories. And another one is, I'm gonna still give the same example of Listerine Mouth rinse, look-alike packaging. So normally, the distinctive packaging designs create strong associations with a particular brand. Companies that make generic or private label brands and want to communicate a quality image often use this linkage when they put their products in packages similar to those of popular brands. How Walgreens used the packaging of Listerine for the mouth rinse. I'm going to give you an example from academic studies on that. One study found that a negative experience with an imitator brand actually increased consumers' evaluations of the original brand, whereas a positive experience with the imitator had the opposite effect of decreasing evaluations of the original brand. So, if I buy Walgreens Mondrins and if I am not happy with it, if the outcome is not what I was expected, then I have even more positive image to with the Listerine, because I'm like, oh my god, I should never change Listerine again. This was horrible. However, if I have with the Walgreens Mondrins a positive experience, then my evaluation of Listerine decreases. I'm like, I will never use Listerine again and pay more money because Walgreens one is much better and it is cheaper and it is blah blah blah. Totally is doing the same thing. So it works opposite way. If you have a negative, if you have a bad experience with the imitator, then your positive evaluations of the original brand increases. But if you have a positive experience with the imitator, then the opposite effect happens, so your evaluations for the original brand decreases. These are the risks and challenges of look-alike packaging. Now, let's learn instrumental conditioning, which is also called operant conditioning. Instrumental conditioning occurs when we learn to perform behaviors that produce positive outcomes, which is expected, and avoid those that yield negative outcomes. So we do the ones that rewards us, and we are avoiding the ones that comes with punishment. We associate this learning process with the psychologist Skinner, who demonstrated the effects of instrumental conditioning by teaching pigeons and other animals to dance and perform other activities when he systematically rewarded them for desired behaviors. Responses to classical conditioning are fairly simple and involuntary, but the responses we make to instrumental conditioning are related to obtaining a goal. We may learn the desired behavior over a period of time as a shaping process rewards our intermediate actions. For example, the owner of a new store may award prizes to shoppers who simply drop in. She hopes that over time they will continue to drop in and eventually even buy something. There is a difference between classical and instrumental conditioning, and both processes help consumers to learn about products. A good way to remember the difference is to keep in mind that in instrumental learning, the person makes a response because it is instrumental to gain a reward or avoid a punishment. Over time, consumers come to associate with people who reward them and to choose products that make them feel good or satisfy some need. Again, the main difference is for instrumental conditioning, we consciously give a response to gain something, to gain a reward, to reach a goal, or to avoid a punishment. On the other hand, with classical conditioning, our responses are simple and involuntary. They're conditioned. They are not related to obtaining a goal, while in instrumental learning, they are related to obtain a goal. So, how does instrumental conditioning occur? We have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. I will explain you one by one with examples so you will understand better. Don't worry about it. Instrumental conditioning occurs, again, I'm repeating, when we learn to perform behaviors that produce positive outcomes, which is the reward, and avoid the ones that will cause negative outcomes, which is the punishment. Whereas in classical conditioning, responses are involuntary. We make decisions, we give responses in instrumental conditioning deliberately to obtain a goal. Okay, this is the difference. We may learn the desired behavior over a period of time as the shaping process rewards our intermediate actions. Okay, I wanted to summarize the previous slide before I come how instrumental conditioning occurs. Instrumental conditioning, the responses we gave it to reach to a goal, occurs in one of the three ways: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. Positive reinforcement comes in the form of a reward. When the environment provides positive reinforcement in the form of a reward, This strengthens the response and will learn the appropriate behavior. For example, a woman who gets compliments after wearing Obsession perfume from Calvin Klein learns that using this product has the desired effect and she will be more likely to keep buying the product. Negative reinforcement shows how a negative outcome can be avoided. Negative reinforcement also strengthens responses so that we learn the appropriate behavior. A perfume company might run an advertising showing a woman sitting home alone on a Saturday night because she didn't wear its fragrance. The message here conveys that she could have avoided this negative outcome of sitting home alone on a Saturday night if only she had used the perfume. So the woman, at the end of the day, the advertisers hope that will go to Sephora or Ulta and buy the perfume after seeing the advertising. In contrast to situations where we learn to do certain things to avoid unpleasantness, punishment occurs when unpleasant events follow a response, such as when our friends ridicule us if we wear a nasty smelling perfume. We learn the hard way not to repeat these behaviors, unfortunately. Finally, when a person no longer receives a positive outcome, no longer receives a compliment, for example, extinction is likely to occur. And the learned stimulus, which is the response connection, will not be maintained. For example, when a woman no longer receives compliments on her Obsession Calvin Klein perfume anymore, then extinction occurs. So the response connection will not be maintained. The woman will go and change the perfume that she was using. She will buy and try a new one because she's not receiving the compliment anymore. She's not being noticed. No one asks, oh, did you change your smell? Did you change your fragrance? Or you smell nice. So she is looking for something new to get the desired reaction. This figure will help you to reinforce the relationships among those four conditions: positive behavior, negative behavior, and the condition applied and condition removed are the events. So positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement strengthen connections, and punishment and extinction weaken connections. For example, in positive reinforcement, consumers learn to perform responses that produce positive outcome. In the extinction, consumer learns that responses no longer produce positive outcome, like not receiving a compliment for the perfume. In the positive reinforcement, the woman is receiving compliments for the perfume. Punishment, consumer learns not to perform responses leading to punishment if someone ridicules you and tells you like you smell horrible with the perfume. And the negative reinforcement, consumers learns to perform responses that allow him or her to avoid negative outcome. So here you are sitting alone, or like you don't have a boyfriend, and an advertising tells you that you would find someone and you would attract the very handsome guy, or blah blah blah, whatever they show it on an advertising if you use the perfume. So in order to avoid the unpleasant situation the consumer is actually living in, goes and buys the product, because products are demonstrated and illustrated like a solution to an unpleasant situation. In addition to deciding whether to use positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, or punishment, marketers also have to decide on a schedule. Marketers need to determine the most effective reinforcement schedule to use because this decision relates to the amount of effort and resources they must put when they reward consumers who respond as they hope to their requests. Several schedules are possible: fixed ratio reinforcement, variable ratio reinforcement, fixed interval reinforcement, variable interval reinforcement. Let's start with fixed ratio reinforcement. This kind of reinforcement occurs only after a fixed number of responses. This schedule motivates an individual to continue performing the same behavior over and over. For example, you might keep buying groceries at the same store to earn a prize when you collect 50 register receipts. Um, Again, when we look at the table, the meaning is reinforcement depends on a definite number of responses, like 50 register receipts, and the activity slows after the reinforcement and then picks up again. Once they collect the 50 register receipts, the activity of going to the same store slows down, and then and again for the reinforcement another collection of 50 receipts starts, so the going to the store again picks up. Variable ratio reinforcement is that you get reinforced after a certain number of responses, but you don't know how many responses are required. So number of responses needed for reinforcement varies. People in such situations tend to respond at high and steady rates, and this type of behavior is difficult to extinguish. So this actually gives us the greatest activity of all schedules. For example, in Las Vegas, in casinos, this kind of reinforcement schedule is used. The variable ratio reinforcement is responsible for consumers' attractions to slot machines. They learn that if they keep throwing money into the same machine, they will eventually win something. Now let's talk about the fixed interval reinforcement. After a specified time period has passed, the first response you make brings the reward. Under such conditions, people tend to respond slowly right after they get reinforced, but their responses get faster as the time for the next reinforcement approaches. For example, consumers may crowd into a store for the last day of its seasonal sale and not reappear, not come back again until the next seasonal sale. So, with fixed interval, the reinforcement depends on a fixed time, there is a due date, and activity increases as the deadline nears, as the deadline is almost there. And the last schedule is variable interval reinforcement. The time that must pass before you get reinforced varies based on some average. Because you don't know exactly when to expect the reinforcement, you have to respond at a consistent rate. This is the logic behind retailers' use of mystery shoppers, secret shoppers, people who periodically test for customer service and quality and the employees performance comes into the store, and they act as customers, but they're actually secret shoppers, they are mystery shoppers, and they give reports to the company's head of marketing or operations. This is what a secret shopper is. These mystery shoppers act as customers and they come to the stores at unannounced times because store employees never know exactly when to expect a visit, and where who is a mystery shopper. They always must maintain their high quality customer service, just in case, because anyone can be a secret shopper who is in the store. So variable interval reinforcement actually creates the steady activity results. However, the time between reinforcements varies. Now the application of instrumental conditioning principles that we have discussed. What was instrumental conditioning principle? A specific response to gain, to reach to a goal or to avoid punishment. So we learn to give that response to reach to something, to achieve something, or to avoid a negative consequence. Frequency marketing is a very popular technique that rewards regular purchasers with prices that get better as they spend more. The airline industry pioneered this application of instrumental conditioning principles into marketing, where the airline industry introduced frequent flyer programs in the early 1980s to reward loyal travelers. The practice became so successful that it has spread to many other businesses as well, from grocery stores to casinos, to hotels, to anything you would think of. I have loyalty cards, and if you are a loyal member, if you carry the loyalty card, it comes with specific rewards for loyal customers. This is called frequency marketing. Now, I want to talk about cognitive learning theory. We were talking about behavioral learning theories. Now we will talk about cognitive learning theory. Unlike behavioral theories of learning that we have discussed so far, cognitive learning theory approaches stress the importance of internal mental processes. This perspective views people as problem solvers who actively use information from the world around them to master their environments. Supporters of this view also stress the role of creativity and insight during the learning process. This is the picture on the screen is a screenshot from the Ocean Spray commercial for Diet Cranberry Juice. I also uploaded the video version of the commercial on Canvas. You can watch the full commercial on Canvas. In this commercial, the Ocean Spray illustrates, actually this commercial illustrates how marketers can use their knowledge of cognitive theories to tweak marketing messages. The spot in the commercial features two men in the role of cranberry growers who stand knee deep in a bog. A group of women who are exercising joins them. Originally, in the ad depicted the woman having a party, but a cognitive scientist who worked on the campaign came up with the idea that, and she argued that the exercise class would send the diet message more quickly, whereas the party scene would confuse viewers who would spend too much time trying to figure out why the group was celebrating. This extra cognitive activity would distract the advertising's message, and contrary to standard practice in advertising, that the actors name the product as early as possible, this scientist decided and proposed that the main characters should wait a few seconds before they mention the new diet product. She reasoned that viewers would need a second or so more time but to process the image because of the additional action in the advertising, which is exercising. And after applying this cognitive scientist suggestions and recommendations to Ocean Spray commercial for dried cranberry juice in an advertising test, of which has been done to test if the advertising was remembered. This ad got remembered best. So the new version of the cranberry juice, the diet cranberry juice, scored in the top 10% of among top percent of the among the advertisings that got remembered, because they worked with a cognitive scientist who tell what to do in a commercial to the advertisers, and what to include, when to use the message, what kind of images they need to use in order to send the consumers memory the idea of dieting, exercising, and the diet cranberry juice. So it's important for marketers to work also with cognitive scientists for better results. Now, observational learning. Observational learning occurs when we watch the actions of others and note the reinforcements they receive for their behaviors. In these situations, learning occurs as a result of vicarious rather than direct experience. This type of learning is a complex process. People store these observations in memory as they accumulate knowledge, and then they use this information at a later point to guide their own behavior. Particularly, we are preoccupied with other demands. We are likely to mimic others' behaviors as a social default. Modeling is the process of imitating, copying the behavior of others. For example, a woman who shops for a new kind of perfume may remember the reactions her friend received when she wore a certain brand several months before, and she will mimic her friend's behavior in the hope that she will get the same feedback. So she will buy the similar brands of perfume that her friend was using in order to get a similar feedback from others. In this figure illustrated on the slide, you can see that for observational learning in the form of modeling to occur, the marketers must meet four conditions. First, the consumer's attention must be directed to the appropriate model, and the person must be someone the consumer wishes to emulate, wishes to imitate. Second, the consumer must remember what the model says or does, which is the retention. Third, the consumer must convert this information into actions. This is the production process. Fourth, the consumer must be motivated to perform these actions. This is the motivation stage. So we learn about products by observing others' behaviors in four conditions: attention, retention, production processes, and motivation. At the end, the observational learning happens. The consumer acquires and performs the behavior earlier demonstrated by a model that she admires, she is willing to emulate, she wishes to imitate. Then let's discuss, how do we learn to be consumers? From where does this knowledge come? Definitely friends and teachers participate in this process. For instance, children talk to one another about consumer products, and this tendency increases as the kids age, as the kids start to grow. Especially for young children, the family and the media are two primary socialization sources. Consumer socialization is the process by which young consumers, young people acquire skills, knowledge, and attitudes relevant to their functioning in the marketplace. The process of consumer socialization begins with infants. In this figure, I show you the sequence of stages as kids turn into consumers. Within the first 2 years, children request products they want. By about age 5, most kids make purchases with the help of parents and grandparents. And by age 8, most of them buy things on their own. They make independent purchases. Now we finished the learning part. Let's talk about memory. Our brains process information about brands to retain them in memory. Many of our experiences are locked inside our heads, and they may surface years later if the right cues prompt them. Marketers rely on consumers to retain information they collect about products and services, so they will apply it to future purchase decisions. We combine this internal memory with external memory when we decide what to buy. This includes all the product details on packages and other marketing stimuli that permit us to identify and evaluate brand alternatives in the marketplace. The grocery shopping list is a good example of a powerful external memory aid. For example, when consumers use shopping lists, they buy approximately 80% of the items on the list. The likelihood that a shopper will purchase a particular list item is higher if the person who wrote the list also participates in the shopping trip. This means that if marketers can induce consumers to plan to purchase an item before they go shopping, there is a high probability that they will buy it. Now let's talk about episodic memories. This is an interesting one. I believe you will find it interesting as well. Episodic memories relate to events that are personally relevant. As a result, a person's motivation to retain these memories will likely be strong. For example, couples often have their song that they dance, their first dance during the weddings, usually, which reminds them of their first date or wedding. Because episodic memories relate to events that are again personally relevant, that are personal and intimate. So we have a motivation to keep these memories. We don't want to forget these memories. That's why it's called episodic. It reminds us some slice, some time in our life that we don't want to forget. Narrative is another concept that is related to memory. A narrative or a description of a product that is written as a story is often an effective way to convey product information. Our memories store a lot of the social information we acquire in story form. It's a good idea to construct advertising in the form of a narrative, in the form of a story, because stories are the best way to communicate, to transfer the product information and to stick in the memory of the consumers. So rather than just giving product information as facts or making strong arguments, it is always a good idea to create a commercial and advertising around us that has a story that touches the heart of the consumer, that touches a part of their life that they can relate to. So that's why narratives are important in order to be remembered. Memory systems is the next thing that we will cover in this chapter. According to the information processing perspective, there are three distinct memory systems: sensory memory, short term memory, and long term memory. I'm sure you have heard about them before. Each plays in processing brand relating information. Each plays a role in this process, in the process of brand related information. Sensory memory stores the information we receive from our senses, from our five senses that we have discussed in our perception chapter, in chapter 3. This storage is temporary. If the information is retained for further processing, it passes through an attentional gate and transfers to short term memory. Short term memory also stores information for a limited period of time, and it has a limited capacity. This system is working memory. It holds information we are currently processing. Our memories can store verbal inputs acoustically and semantically. We store this kind of information by combining small pieces into larger ones in a process we call chunking. A chunk is a configuration that is familiar and the person can think about it as a unit. For example, a brand name such as Seven for All Mankind is a chunk that represents a great deal of detailed information about the product. Uh, and lastly, long term memory is the system that allows us to retain information for a long period of time. A cognitive process we call elaborative rehearsal allows information to move from short memory to long memory. Marketers assist in the process when they devise catchy slogans or musical jingles that consumers repeat on their own. So once the consumers start to repeat, they and memorize the jingles and the slogans, they transfer the product and the brand from their short memory to long-term memory. An incoming piece of information gets stored in an associative network, contains many bits of information. Think of these storage units or knowledge structures as complex spider webs filled with pieces of data. Incoming information gets gets put into nodes that connect to one another. This means when we view separate pieces of information as similar for some reason, we chunk them together under some more abstract category. This figure on the slide shows an associative network for perfumes. We each have organized systems for concepts that relate to brands, manufacturers, and stores stored in our memories. Each node represents a concept related to the category. This node can be an attribute, a specific brand, a celebrity the consumer identifies with a specific perfume brand, or even a related product. A network of perfumes might include concepts such as the brand names like Viva La Juicy by Juicy Couture, Calvin Klein Eternity, and Elizabeth Arden Red Door, as well as attributes such as sexy and elegant. When we ask the consumer to list perfumes, this consumer recalls only those brands that show up in the appropriate category. The task of a new entrant, new player to the market that wants to position itself as a category member, for example, a new luxury perfume, has to provide cues that facilitates its placement in the appropriate category in order to be selected by the consumer. Because as we said, consumers list and remembers brands from the memory based on those associations. A marketing message may activate our memory of a brand directly or indirectly. If it activates a node, it will also activate other linked nodes, as we see from the associative networks in the previous slide. Because it is like tapping a spider's web in one spot sends movement reverberating across the web. This process of spreading activation allows us to shift back and forth among levels of meaning. The way we store a piece of information in memory depends on the type of meaning we initially assign to it. This meaning type then determines how and when something activates the meaning. The meaning types are listed in the slide. I will explain you with an example. The Axe deodorant example also I used as a visual on the slide. Brand specific meaning refers to memory stored in terms of the claims the brand makes. For example, the brand is Macho. Ad specific meaning refers to memory stored in terms of the medium or content of the advertising itself. A macho looking guy uses the product in a commercial, in an advertising. Brand identification is memory stored in terms of the brand name. Axe is the brand name. Product category meaning is memory stored in terms of how the product works or where it should be used. For example, a bottle of Axe sits in a guy's medicine cabinet. Evaluation reactions is memory stored as positive or negative emotions. For example, at the end, you have the emotion that it looks good. This product looks good, this man looks good, this advertising looks good. So you have a positive emotion towards the whole communication. Now, how we retrieve memories? Situational factors influence retrieval. These relate to the environment in which we face the message. Not surprisingly, recall is enhanced when we pay more attention to the message in the first place. Some evidence showed that we can more easily retrieve information about a pioneering brand. Pioneering brand is the first brand to enter a market. So we retrieve information from about a pioneering brand from memory. Then we can for follower brands that write their coattails, because the first product's introduction is likely to be distinctive, and for the time being, no competitors divert our attention. In addition, we are more likely to recall descriptive brand names than those that do not provide proper, adequate cues as to what the product is. So when we're looking and when we're choosing brand names, we need to make sure that it actually has an association with the actual product and it gives some idea what the product is when what it offers. What is a pioneering brand? Pioneering brand is the brand that is the first entrant to the market, that they introduce something new to the market that has been never done before, like the key cup packs from Keurig. They were the pioneer coffee delivery company, a pioneer coffee delivery method that created a new coffee market, which is the capsule coffees that we see today, capsules for coffee. And then we saw many competitors came into the market, from Nespresso to Tassimo to Dualit to Nescafe. But we still know Keurig because Keurig is the pioneering brand, while the rest are the follower brands who applied the capsule coffee delivery method and came up with their own machines and capsules. Now, what makes us forget? Let's talk about, now that we talked about memory and we covered memory, how we forget, what makes us to forget. Marketers obviously hope that consumers will not forget about their products. However, in a poll, in a survey of more than 13,000 adults, more than half were unable to remember any specific advertising they had seen, heard, or read in the past 30 days. I mean, how many can you remember right now? I don't really. Clearly, forgetting by consumers is a big challenge, big headache for marketers. Early early memory theorists assume that memories simply fade with the passage of time. In a process of decay, the structural changes that learning produces in the brain simply go away. Forgetting also occurs as a result of interference. As we learn additional information, our brain erases the old ones, which is called interference. Now let's talk about how we measure memory for marketing stimuli. And how do we know if our marketing messages are designed to help consumer remember them? In order to understand if our marketing messages that we create is effective and if consumers remember them or not, we do some measuring tests. We can measure recognition and recall. In a typical recognition test, researchers show advertising to subjects one at a time and ask if they have seen them before. In contrast, free recall tasks ask consumers to independently think of what they have seen without being prompted first. Both types of retrieval play important roles in purchase behavior. Recall tends to be more important in situations in which consumers do not have product data at their disposal, so they must rely on memory to generate this information. However, recognition is more likely to be an important factor in a store where retailers confront consumers with thousands of product options, and the task simply may be to recognize a familiar package. Of course, measures of memory can be faulty. So there are some problems with memory measures. For example, they may be contaminated by response biases. For example, people tend to give yes responses to questions regardless of what the item asks. Sometimes these participants don't even know what the question is. They don't read it. They just sign yes. In addition, experimental subjects often are very eager to be good subjects, so they try to figure out what the researcher, what the experimenter is looking for, and give the response they think they are supposed to give. So they want to give what the experimenter, what the researcher is looking for. They don't give their honest opinion. Also, people suffer from memory lapses. The typical problems include omitting facts, averaging, or normalizing the memories by not reporting extreme cases, and telescoping, which means inaccurate recalls of time. Here, the important part you need to understand and you need to learn is the difference between recognition and recall. Our memory, as I said, works in two different modes, which is one of them is recognition and the second one is recall. An example is that it will help you remember better is when we meet something that we already know, we can quickly recognize it. It's like you meet someone on the street. Recall is, on the other hand, a deeper process of memory. You make an order to your mind to return information, like you meet old friend on the street and ask yourself what is his name. Sometimes you cannot remember the name, but you know exactly that this is someone you have met before. Now the bittersweet memories, the marketing power of nostalgia that I gave you, that I explained you the concept in my first slides. Nostalgia uses the products that helps us to retrieve memories from our past. We opened this chapter with Joe's journey of one day with the products that reminds him his past, his happy days, in all good old past days. Nostalgia describes the bittersweet emotion that arises when we view the past with both sadness and longing. References to the good old days are increasingly common as advertisers call up memories of youngness, and hope that these feelings will translate to what they are selling today. A retro brand is an updated version of a brand from a prior historical period, like the Pepsi example or the Doritos example I gave in my previous slides. These products trigger nostalgia, and researchers find that they often inspire consumers to think back to an era when life was more stable, simple, or even utopian, at least in their memories. Simply, the advertisers let us look backward through pink color glasses. One study reported that people who were asked to think about the past were willing to pay more for products than those who were asked to think about new or future memories. Mini Cooper, PT Cruiser, and Volkswagen's New Beetle are all retro brands. Marketers often use popular characters and stories from days gone by. They hope that consumers found memories will motivate them to revisit the past. Fossil is the brand, and this is one of their advertising. The Fossil's product designs evoke memories of earlier and classic styles. Another example of retro brands is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is a reviving Surge, a citrus flavor soda that it was discontinued more than a decade ago, more than 10 years ago. The brand is the Surge brand owned by Coca-Cola is coming back after a millennial fan base called the Surge Movement spent years of lobbying for it to return. They used this is the screenshot from their Facebook page. The Movement's Facebook page has more than 150,000 likes, and they even used billboards, like you see on the example, sending a message to Coca-Cola company: "Dear Coke, we couldn't buy Surge, so we bought this billboard instead." And Coca-Cola decided to listen them, and they are rebringing the Surge, this citrus flavored soda that was discontinued a decade ago. Another example of retro brands is Calvin Klein. Calvin Klein collaborated with the luxury fashion store mytheresa.com to reissue 1990s, the clothing era that they launched their collection with Kate Moss, and they started the modeling career of Kate Moss at that time around on 90s. And in 1990s, Kate Moss was synonymous with Calvin Klein. So they relaunched 1990s clothing style with a collaboration with mytheresa.com. The photographs that they used, the photo shootings, were familiar. They were shot in black and white with parrot back styling and a face that resembles to Kate Moss. Even the girl that model they used was resembling Kate Moss, which they were using in 1990s. However, the funny part is Calvin Klein has picked up the Kate Moss' younger sister, Lottie Moss, for this campaign, and has recreated the black and white snaps for the new collection, the reissue. The reissue is the name of the collection. So Calvin Klein is already doing a throwback. All these throwback campaigns of Pepsi, Doritos, Calvin Klein, Coca-Cola are very popular because of this nostalgia concept that retrieve that allows consumers to retrieve their memories from the past. Now, the chapter summary, what we have learned in this chapter is that marketers need to know how consumers learn in order to develop effective communication messages. Conditioning results in learning. Learning can be accomplished through classical and instrumental conditioning and through observing the behavior of others. Our brains process information about brands to retain them in memory. The other products we associate with an individual product influence how we will remember it. Marketers measure our memories about products and advertising, and products help us to retrieve memories from our past, which is called nostalgia, and retro brands are the result of nostalgia. So that's it. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you need any clarifications, you know what to do. You can send me an email or you can ask for a WebEx session. Have fun listening to the video. See you next chapter.